My daughter's groom smirked and told me I wasn't welcome. That cut me like a knife, especially after I had written check after check, $45,000 in total. All those years of sacrifice, all that money, and still he treated me like trash. But I wasn't done. I had uncovered a secret, and when it came out, his world collapsed right there at the altar. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in the living room that had held my family together for more than 40 years. The old oak table stood in front of me, scratched and worn from countless dinners and late-night talks. On it was a framed photograph of my wife, Mary, smiling as she held our daughter Emily on her first day of school. I traced the edge of the frame with my finger, remembering how much I had given, how much I had sacrificed, believing it was for Emily's future. I had paid $60,000 in college tuition so she could walk across that graduation stage debt-free. I had surprised her with a brand new car worth $25,000 the day she accepted her first job. Later, when she wanted to buy her first condo, I had written another check to help with the down payment, even though it meant dipping into my retirement. At the time, I thought nothing of it. I was her father, and fathers do what they must for their children. But sitting there now, staring at Mary's photograph, the memories tasted bitter. All those sacrifices had not bought me love or gratitude. They had only bought me silence and betrayal. The sting cut deeper than any knife could. My eyes wandered to the house itself, my pride and joy. Built with my own hands, every nail and board carried a piece of my life. This house, now worth $600,000, had been the stage for birthday parties, Thanksgiving dinners, and Christmas mornings filled with laughter. On the mantel sat our wedding picture, beside it a gold pocket watch passed down from my grandfather. These were not just objects, they were pieces of who I was, of who my family had been. Yet now, this very house was at risk of being stolen. My retirement account, $200,000 carefully saved through decades of sweat, was suddenly in danger of being drained. These weren't just numbers on paper. They represented the long nights I had spent working overtime, the weekends I had skipped vacations, the years I had gone without so Emily could have more. And now, the people I loved most were conspiring to take it all, as if my life's work meant nothing. The betrayal was not just about money. It was about the bond between a father and a daughter being twisted into something ugly and cold. The memory of what I had overheard still haunted me. Michael, the man Emily planned to marry, spoke on the phone late at night, not knowing I was standing in the hallway. His voice was sharp, filled with greed. He called Emily a mark, a target, nothing more than a pawn in his scheme. My heart pounded as I leaned against the wall, listening in disbelief. Every word he spoke felt like a hammer striking me down. I wanted to burst into the room, to confront him then and there, but something inside me froze. I kept hearing his words repeat in my mind. The old man's money, the house, the accounts, they'll be ours. My chest tightened as I remembered Mary, the love of my life, taken from me too soon. I whispered into the quiet room, "Mary, do you see this? They are turning our daughter into a tool, using her to bleed me dry." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. I could almost feel Mary's presence beside me, her gentle hand on my shoulder. It should have been comforting, but it only deepened the ache, knowing she wasn't here to fight this battle with me. For a while I sat there stunned, unable to move. The shock left me hollow, as though someone had scooped out my insides and left nothing but an empty shell. I replayed every moment, every smile, every thank you from Emily, wondering if they had all been lies. Was she truly in on this, or was Michael pulling all the strings? I didn't want to believe my daughter was capable of betraying me, but the evidence weighed heavily, crushing the denial I tried to cling to. Slowly, pain gave way to something else, anger. If I did nothing, I would lose not only the house and the money, but also the memory of the family Mary and I had built. The thought of being cast aside, sent to a nursing home while they sold everything I had worked for, filled me with fire. My grief began to harden into resolve. I realized that silence would cost me everything. Action was the only path forward. My jaw clenched as I thought, if they believe I am weak, they are about to see how wrong they are. The house echoed with memories that now mocked me. The wooden floors I had laid down myself creaked under my feet as I paced. In the kitchen, I could still picture Emily sitting at the table, swinging her legs as she asked for help with her homework. The smell of Mary's cooking still lingered in the walls, as if she had just stepped out for a moment and would be back any second. Each memory was like a dagger, a reminder of what was slipping away. Betrayal didn't come from strangers. Betrayal came from the people who knew exactly where your heart was weakest. I sat back down in the old armchair, staring at the fireplace where countless family conversations had taken place. To be betrayed here, in the very home that symbolized love and unity, was almost unbearable. Yet, that same pain sharpened my resolve. If they wanted this house, they would have to take it over my dead body. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light through the windows, my eyes fell on a drawer in the corner cabinet. Slowly, I pulled it open, and there it was. An envelope thick with documents. I spread them across the table. The insurance policy I had taken out after Mary passed, the deed to the house with my name alone etched in bold letters, bank statements showing years of careful saving. These were not just papers. They were weapons, proof of ownership, shields against those who thought they could outsmart me. My fingers trembled as I gathered them, not from fear, but from a strange sense of power. For the first time in weeks, I felt control returning to me. A thought crossed my mind. Tomorrow, I will call my lawyer. I will not sit idle while they strip me of everything. I will fight back with every ounce of strength I have left. The night grew quiet, but inside me a storm raged. I walked back to Mary's photograph and whispered, "I will not let them destroy what we built. I will protect our daughter, even from herself if I must, and I will protect the life we created, the home we dreamed of." Saying it out loud steadied me. It reminded me that this fight was not just about me. It was about honoring Mary, about preserving the dignity of the sacrifices we had both made. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also awakened a fire I thought had long gone out. By the time I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs, my decision was sealed. Tomorrow would not be a day of sorrow. Tomorrow would be the beginning of my counterattack. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. I woke before sunrise, the house still and blue, and poured coffee into the chipped mug Mary loved. The quiet steadied me. Yesterday was shocking. Today would be the action. I slid the deed with my name alone, Mary's insurance policy, and my retirement statement into a leather folder. Saying it out loud helped me commit. Today, I act. I rinsed the mug, wiped the counter, and checked the locks out of habit. Small rituals make courage easier. I pulled a yellow legal pad from the drawer and listed what had to happen in order: lawyer, bank, records, and then whatever came next. I wrote Mary's name at the top of the page, circled it twice, and tucked the pad under my arm with the folder. The day felt heavy, but honest. By 8:30 I was at my attorney's office. I had used Tom Granger for wills and small disputes, but never for something like this. He greeted me, saw my face, and led me in without small talk. I spread the documents across his desk and told him what I feared. "I need you to check ownership and control," I said. "My house was last appraised at $600,000. My retirement is $200,000 in an IRA and a money market. I believe my daughter's fiancé is trying to get access. He is not what he says." He read like a surgeon studies a scan, slow, precise, noting each line. The blinds clicked in the air conditioning. A siren wailed somewhere and faded. My hands would not lie still, so I pressed my palms flat on the desk until the shaking eased. Tom read in silence, then tapped the deed. "Title is clean in your name. Your will leaves the house to Emily after your death. No one else has rights now." He set the paper down. "That said, cons play on speed and confusion. We will slow everything down. File a notice with the county that you do not intend to transfer. Place fraud alerts at the bureaus and call your bank today. Freeze distributions. Require in-person verification and a call to me." Freeze. The word felt like steel in my ribs. "Do it," I said. "Print whatever I need." He prepared forms and highlighted lines. Signing my name steadied me. He updated my power of attorney to a neutral third party and drafted a letter to my bank manager. He looked up. "Is Emily involved?" "I do not know," I said. I heard him call her a mark. He talked about the old man's money. That old man is me." Tom nodded once. Then we moved fast. By 10, I was at the bank. The manager, Carla, listened carefully as I requested a hard freeze on my IRA and money market totaling $200,000. No electronic transfers, no phone authorizations. Any distribution in person only, with 2 IDs and a call to Tom. She offered water. I declined and asked her to hear me out before asking questions. I laid out the situation in plain language, the way a carpenter measures twice and cuts once. She did not rush me. When I finished, she turned her screen so I could see the security settings and the audit trail, thin gray lines marking every change ever made. I slid Tom's letter across her desk. Carla typed notes, then asked me to choose a passphrase. I stared at the paper and said, "Bluebird." Mary loved to watch them at the feeder. "Bluebird it is," she said. "If anyone calls, we ask for it first. We will contact you and your attorney if anything seems off." Outside, the sun warmed the sidewalk. Action had weight. I breathed easier, then stopped myself from calling Emily. I was not ready to hear her voice. That afternoon, Michael texted me in his syrupy style. "Mr. T, coffee? Emily misses you." I agreed to meet on Broad Street. He arrived in a crisp shirt and an expensive watch that looked borrowed. He sat, faking warmth. "Richard, I'm glad you came. We're family," he said. "Not yet," I said. He laughed, ordered cappuccinos, and talked about nothing. He tapped the table with 2 fingers when the waiter walked by, a small command he dressed up as charm. When the cappuccinos arrived, he slid mine closer without asking if I wanted sugar, like I was one more detail he could arrange. I let the cup sit and cool between us. Finally, he leaned in. "You've done a lot for Emily. We appreciate it. But there comes a time when parents let the next generation steer. Fresh ideas. New energy." "Fresh ideas don't require my signature," I said, "or my house, or my accounts." "No one is after your house," he said with a thin smile. "Good," I said. "It is not for sale." He spread his hands. "We just want peace. Emily thinks you do not approve." "I like peace," I said, "and honesty, and people who use their real names." "Real names?" The question hung there, and for a breath, the room seemed to grow narrower, like the walls had taken a step toward us. We parted outside. He patted my shoulder like a coach consoling a player. For a heartbeat, his mask slipped, and I saw naked contempt. It steeled me. That evening, I walked the hall and paused at Emily's old room, sunflowers stitched by Mary on the bedspread. I needed proof before I accused my child. It came sooner than I wanted. Emily had asked me to store wedding favors after a rehearsal. I went by her apartment to return a box. Her car was gone. The door was unlocked. I set the box on the counter and heard a voice in the bedroom. The bedroom door was half closed. A suitcase lay open on the chair, ties draped like ribbons. I could smell his cologne, sharp and chemical. His voice traveled through the crack like smoke through a vent. Michael's voice, low and certain. "Daniel, the wedding is on schedule," he said. "After we sign, I'll get access to her accounts. The old man has already put over 40 grand into this thing. We'll talk to the realtor about the house. It's worth 600 easy. Don't push me on percentages. We said 30. The edge of the counter bit my palm. Then he laughed. "She's a mark. Sweet, eager, wants to please Daddy. He's the key. He breaks. It all breaks." I did not breathe. I stood there and listened while a man put a price on my daughter and on my life. When his footsteps moved toward the hall, I slipped out, quietly as I could, heart rattling. The hallway light flickered. My knee knocked a shoe by the mat, and I caught it before it fell. Breath returned in a ragged rush only when I reached the landing. I stood there counting to 30, then to 30 again, until the roar in my ears settled. On the stairs, I steadied myself and whispered into the dark truck cab, "Mary, it's worse than I thought." I drove around the block until my hands stopped shaking. A part of me wanted to storm back in and end it. Another part knew truth lands badly when hearts are set. I went back an hour later because Emily texted about ribbon for favors. When I stepped inside, she sat curled on the couch, eyes red. Michael's arm draped over her shoulders like a claim. "Richard, we need to talk," he said softly. "Emily is hurting." Emily looked at me. "Dad, I can't keep doing this," she whispered. I wanted to cross the room and pull her into my arms the way I did when she was 5, and thunderstorms shook the windows. I wanted to lay the truth on the coffee table like a set of tools, name each piece, and fix what was broken in an afternoon. Love makes a man foolish about time. Some things cannot be fixed in a day. "I feel like you want to ruin our wedding. Michael thinks you don't respect him. He thinks you're trying to control my life." Michael sighed in that patient way he used on waiters. "No one wants a fight. We just need boundaries. It's time to let her live her life." I held the ribbon and swallowed the truth I wanted to shout. If I said I had heard him call her a mark, she would hear only jealousy. She would hear grief turning me small. I placed the ribbon on the table. "Emily, I love you," I said. "I want you safe." I looked at Michael. "And I want honesty." He smiled, thin as a blade. "Honesty is all we want, too." On the way out, Emily's voice followed me. "Why can't you just be happy for me, Dad?" Outside, the air felt heavy, like the hour before a storm. Anger surged, then settled into something colder. Strategy. I needed facts with names and dates. I needed a witness who knew him before he put on his new suit. The next morning, I called a private investigator recommended by a retired officer I trusted. Her name was Patricia Hayes, former detective, fraud detail, no nonsense. We met at a diner that did not try to be cute. The diner smelled of bacon and hot coffee, and a short-order cook sang along with an old Motown song on the radio. Patricia wore a navy jacket and practical shoes. She did not waste words or warmth. She treated this like a job that could be done if we stayed patient. She listened, asked for names, dates, and copies. I told her exactly what I had heard. I told her about the house and the accounts. She asked for a short list of vendors and family contacts. "I need to know who he really is," I said. "Records, arrests, associates." "Give me 48 hours, she said. "You're not trying to stop a wedding. You're trying to stop a theft." "I am," I said. "And I am trying to save my daughter." 2 mornings later, Patricia called. "Michael Carter is an alias," she said. "Real name, David Collins. At least 4 identities in 5 years. 1 fraud conviction in Florida. 2 arrests that did not stick. He has worked with a man named Daniel Rivera. They split after money went missing. Rivera might talk." "I am listening," I said. She sent a number with an Atlanta area code. I stood by the window, phone in hand, then pressed call. A weary voice answered on the 4th ring. "This is Rivera." "Mr. Rivera, my name is Richard Thompson," I said. "You don't know me, but you know the man calling himself Michael Carter. He plans to marry my daughter and strip her family. I need your help." "What do you want?" "The truth," I said. "Names, dates, how he works, and your presence when it matters." Silence stretched. Then he said, "He owes me 15 grand, and a year I won't get back." "I'm not asking for anything illegal," I said. "Just the truth in the right room." "When?" "The wedding day. I will tell you when to walk in." He gave a small, dry laugh. "You want drama?" "I want clarity," I said. "For my daughter, and for every witness he fools." "I'll be there," he said. "Not for you, for me." We hung up. Relief and dread braided together. A plan had shape. Patricia emailed a tidy report of records and photos, the alias sheet, the Florida court docket, 3 addresses linking Collins to Rivera, even a photo from a clinic where Collins had volunteered to decorate his nurse's story. I thanked her and asked for one more list. "Vendors," I said. "Contacts and numbers." When it arrived, I stared at it for a long time. Florist, caterer, venue, band, photographer. Each had balances I was supposed to cover. Michael's words rang in my head. "After we sign, I'll get access. I would not fund my own robbery." I called the venue first and told the coordinator there was a change. I heard surprise slide into their voices when I mentioned the bride's family. People who handle money notice the small wrong notes before anyone else. They always do. I repeated the same cheerful message to the florist, the caterer, the band, and the photographer, and gave each the same dead number. I drove to the church and walked the side path to the small service door near the kitchen. I traced the aisle with my eyes, counted 12 pews from the back to the place where the light makes a pale square on the floor in late afternoon. I tested a text to Patricia to make sure the service was held. I tested the latch that stuck if you did not lift while turning. I stood in the last pew and pictured the exact moment I would text Rivera. My stomach tightened, but my hands felt steady. In that old wooden silence, I promised Mary I would not flinch. When I got home, a message from Emily waited. "Dad, Michael says you were rude at coffee. Please stop, I can't handle this." I listened twice, then put the phone face down. If I tried to explain, I would be arguing with a net. The next morning, I met Tom to sign the last papers. We notarized the fraud alerts and filed the county notice. He slid a durable power of attorney across the desk, naming a retired judge as my agent. "You've built a good fence," he said. "It won't stop a con from trying to jump, but it will slow him." "I'm not done," I said. "Be careful with the public part," he said. "Courts are for facts, churches are for vows." He tapped his pen twice, the way he did when he was weighing risk. "Public truth ends games fast," he said, "but it breaks hearts fast, too." I nodded. Hearts were already breaking. "The facts are ready," I said. I heard him with my own ears. 2 days before the wedding, the first vendor calls began. The florist wanted a confirmation from the bride's family. The caterer mentioned a declined card. The venue asked who was responsible. I let the calls go to voicemail. Michael texted, then called. I left the phone face down and went for a walk. Silence was my answer. Quiet. Let me think. That afternoon, I stopped by Emily's apartment. She sat at the table, writing place cards, careful loops in blue ink. "Dad," she said, still writing, "did you change something with the vendors? They're calling me." "I made some calls," I said. "I told them to check with the bride's family." She set down the pen. "Why would you do that?" "I wanted to see who answered," I said. "Michael says you're trying to embarrass us." "I am trying to protect you," I said. "From what?" "From being stolen," I said. The word hung between us. She flinched, then turned the cards into a neat stack, like order could hold back tidewater. That night, I dreamed of Mary in the garden, telling me to bring in the laundry before it rained. In the morning, I packed Patricia's folder, photos, dockets, alias sheet, into a messenger bag. I left it by the door, the way you leave a flashlight ready for a storm. In the afternoon, Patricia called again. "Rivera is on board," she said. "He'll drive down the morning of?" "Where should he wait?" "In the church parking lot," I said. "Far corner under the oaks." "I'll text when it's time." "Are you sure you want this public?" she asked. "I'm sure I want it true," I said. "He speaks, the room hears, and there will be no more pretending." "Then good luck," she said. I stood in the hallway and looked in the mirror. A tired man stared back. A stubborn man. A father. I straightened my shoulders anyway. The evening before the wedding, I sat at the kitchen table with my father's gold pocket watch open. It ticked like a calm heart. I could almost feel the warmth of my father's palm, the day he pressed the watch into my hand and told me to be steady, not clever. Steady carries a man over rough ground. I traced the engraving and whispered, "I'm trying, Mary. I'm taking care of what matters." A text from an unknown number arrived. "We should talk." Then another. "I know what he did to you too." "Rivera." I called, and he answered on the first ring. "I'll say it plain," he said. "Names, dates, how he works. He's charming until the bill comes due." "That is enough," I said. "Truth is enough." "You got a lot of family coming?" he asked. "Too many," I said. "See you tomorrow," he said, and hung up. I closed the watch and slid the papers back into the bag. I set my alarm, turned out the lights, and stood at the bottom of the stairs listening to the old house settle. The boards creaked like an old friend turning over in sleep. I rested my hand on the banister and spoke into the quiet, not as a threat, but as a promise. "They think I've lost," I whispered. "But the game is just beginning." I said it twice to be sure I owned it. The house seemed to listen. Somewhere a pipe clicked, then stilled. I climbed the stairs feeling older, and also, somehow, lighter. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, Please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. Morning came with a thin gray light that made the kitchen seem honest. I took Mary's favorite mug from the shelf, poured coffee, and spread Patricia's folder on the table like a deck of cards. On top lay Tom's letter, the line I liked to read twice. Title in my name only, retirement distributions frozen for in-person verification with a passphrase. The house was worth $600,000, the nest egg $200,000. Numbers are cold until someone plans to steal them. Then they feel warm, like blood in the hand. I touched the envelope edges until my breathing matched the clock above the stove. Today would not be about noise. Today would be about proof, timing, and the kind of steadiness you practice when you tell a truth no one wants to hear. I started with the vendors because money is the fuel that keeps a lie moving. I called the venue and thanked the coordinator by name. I told her the bride's family would be settling final balances. She said that was wonderful. I told the florist the same, and the caterer, and the band, and the photographer. I wrote down the time of each call on a yellow pad. When the last call ended, the kitchen felt larger. I stood there until my breath matched the steady tick of my father's pocket watch. If Michael was counting on my payments to carry his pageant over the finish line had just moved. Not canceled. Moved. Let the truth stand on its own 2 feet for once. Around noon, I phoned Emily. I made my voice easy. I told her I might drive to Savannah the whole weekend, wander the squares, let the 2 of them enjoy their day without the shadow of old family feelings. She exhaled in a way that told me Michael had been whispering his small stories. I said I loved her. Loved. I told her we would talk after the honeymoon. When I set the phone down, I let my hand rest on it a moment longer, as if warmth could travel back through plastic and wires and soften what was coming. Late afternoon, the black sedan arrived. A woman stepped out in a pearl blouse and expensive sunglasses. She introduced herself as Michael's aunt. She said the family had decided not to attend because they feared I would ruin the day. She lowered her voice and called me controlling, said I was clinging to my daughter because I could not face my own loneliness, and said I did not respect boundaries. She said they were gracious people and would take Emily in no matter how I behaved. She smiled like she had practiced that smile in a mirror. The words were meant to bruise and to seed doubt, and they did it smoothly, like a needle. She did not know Emily had come by to pick up candles and was standing at the side door. I saw my daughter's face when the last sentence landed, hurt, then confusion, then the little nod people give when a lie sounds like something they already fear. Emily asked if I had said unkind things to Michael. I told her I had asked for honesty and boundaries. She looked past me toward the table, toward the folder and the yellow pad, and then turned away. It is hard to watch your own child walk out carrying the weight of someone else's words. It is harder not to run after her with everything you know. I did not run. Proof belongs in daylight, not in whispers on a porch. I called Patricia as soon as the sedan pulled away. I told her about the aunt. She listened, then said she would forward our file to a contact at the Bureau's white-collar unit and request quiet eyes at the church. "You hold the room," she said. "I will hold the edges." I thanked her and stood by the sink until the light on the backyard fence turned gold. That night I set out my suit, polished my shoes, and put the folder into a messenger bag with 2 fresh copies of Tom's letter. Before bed I held my father's watch in my palm and whispered Mary's name into the quiet. "If you can hear me, keep me steady." I woke before dawn on the wedding day. Coffee, shower, dark suit, the watch in my vest pocket. I wrote Bluebird on an index card and tucked it beside the folder, not because I needed the passphrase, but because the word carries a gentleness that reminds a man who he is. By mid-morning, the vendors were calling again about balances. Michael's number flashed 3 times. I let the calls roll to voicemail. Emily left one message asking if I had changed something because people were calling her nervously. I pressed the phone to my chest and closed my eyes. I wanted to fix it in the simple way fathers fix broken shelves and loose hinges. But this was not a hinge. This was a door that needed to be opened in front of everyone. I got to the church an hour and a half early. Staff moved floral buckets through the side door near the kitchen. I lifted the latch I had tested the day before and slipped into the back of the sanctuary, The air smelled like lilies and old wood. Sunlight fell in clean squares across the aisle. White ribbons looped along the pews. I stood behind the last column where the shadow would keep me small. I checked my phone. A text from Patricia. "Rivera is in the lot under the oaks. Ready when you are." I answered one word. Soon. 5 minutes before the procession, I texted Rivera the signal. Now. Then I waited through the longest 30 seconds a man can know, the ones between a choice and its consequence. The doors at the back opened, and there was Emily, lace and light, stepping toward a future that did not exist. My throat tightened. She reached the altar. Michael lifted her hand as if he owned it. And then the side door near the sacristy opened again, and Daniel Rivera walked in like a man who ran out of patience last year and decided not to waste any more of it. He did not shout. He did not need to. He said the groom had another name, David Collins. He said he had records and a memory that does not forget theft. He held up his phone, and a voice filled the sanctuary, bored and professional. Michael talked about timelines. He said once the papers were signed, he could move funds in a week. He said the old man had already put over 40 grand into the show. He called Emily a mark and laughed. The laugh made people flinch. Emily's bouquet dipped. A white rose fell and rolled toward the pews like a small moon escaping its tide. Rivera stopped the audio and read a case number from a page in Patricia's folder. He read a charge and a date. He held up a photograph taken at a clinic where Collins had volunteered just enough to dress a lie. That was when 2 men in dark suits stepped through the side door. They moved without hurry. The taller one showed a badge and asked the groom to step into the hallway. Michael laughed, like a boy who believes adults are joking. He said words like misunderstanding and mistake. He told the officiant it would only take a moment, then tried to take Emily's hand. She pulled it back to her chest as if from heat. They went into the hall. The door closed. The room exhaled in one piece, the way a building breathes after a storm when you realize the roof held. The organist set the cover over the keys as if to keep dust off the keys. The planner stared at the program, unwilling to turn the page. The officiant lowered his head. Emily stood as if the floor had tilted under her. I stepped out from behind the column and stayed 3 pews back. She lifted her eyes to me. There was pain, and something else beginning. Understanding is slow until it is not. From the front row, a sharp voice cut through the air. Michael's aunt had slipped in and now stood with the confidence of a person who thinks volume is truth. She declared that I had planned this, that I had paid people, that I hated losing control, that I had sabotaged the vendors to create a scene. A few guests nodded because nodding is easier than thinking when rooms are loud. I looked at her and then at the table near the front. Patricia walked forward and set the folder down like a person sets a loaf of bread. No drama, just sustenance. She opened the alias sheet and the docket. Emily stepped closer and looked. She saw Tom's letter at the top, the one that protected the $600,000 house and the $200,000 saved from overtime and quiet years. She saw the aliases. She saw the docket. She saw the photograph that made the lie look tidy. She asked one question: how long? Patricia answered with a month and a city. Emily closed her eyes and opened them again. I heard a small sound leave her throat, the kind a person makes when a bandage comes off and the air is both pain and relief. The side door opened, and Michael reappeared with the agents. His face had the flat look men polish when they want to hide how scared they are. He spoke to the room as if cameras were everywhere. He said he was the victim of an obsessed former associate. He said the audio was edited. He said love changes people. The taller agent cut through the speech with a sentence about continuing at the field office. Michael's shoulders rose. The agent waited. Shoulders fell. The men turned toward the door. Emily took one step back and then another, leaving him to walk alone. As they reached the door, Michael pointed straight at me and told the room I had done this, that I was a bitter old man, that I could not stand losing control of my daughter. He said I had ruined the one day that should have been perfect. He made himself a victim with the skill of a person who has practiced that speech in mirrors. I did not swat at the words. Swatting gives flies glory. I spoke so only Emily could hear. I said, I chose truth. I said, "You deserve better than a lie with good posture." They let him out. The latch clicked. The room seemed bigger. The officiant closed his book with the care of a man setting a sleeping child down. The planner asked what to do. I said people were hungry and the food was paid for through today. I asked the band to play something honest. They chose a slow blues and let the notes carry what words could not. Guests moved toward the hall, unsure whether to whisper or laugh. That is how people cross a broken bridge. One careful step, then another. In the reception room, voices were soft, the way they are in waiting rooms. Patricia brought me water. Rivera told Emily he was sorry and that he would be leaving town before sunset. He said his part was done. He did not ask for thanks. Neighbors squeezed my shoulder. Old friends from the street patted my back. Some people said I had done the right thing. Some said nothing at all, and that felt holy. A couple from 2 houses over cut the cake into neat squares and placed them on platevka. The order itself could help. When the first wave of shock passed, Emily asked to see the folder again. Patricia spread the pages on a side table, clean and square. Tom's letter, the alias sheet, the docket, the photo. Emily read each one and kept her breathing even. She asked how many people knew. I told her a few careful ones. She touched my wrist and nodded. I watched her eyes clear little by little, the way a window clears when warm air finally reaches cold glass. By early evening, people began to leave. Hugs took more time than usual. The band played one last song and packed their cases. The planner asked about the flowers. I said send them to the hospital, to the nurses who work when rooms are quiet. That answer would have made Mary smile. Dust hung in the long light like tiny worlds unhurried by our trouble. Emily stood beside me, holding her shoes. "Dad," she said, "I am so sore." I told her she did not owe me an apology. I told her she owed herself rest, water, and a long sleep. She nodded and leaned against my shoulder, the way she did as a child when thunder shook the windows and I counted slowly to 10. Outside, the air held the warmth of late afternoon. Rivera's car was already gone. Patricia stood under the oaks and said the bureau might need simple statements later and that Tom would handle any calls. She said I had chosen truth instead of revenge. I said it did not feel like kindness. She said kindness is not softness. Kindness is a hard choice made without hate. I thought about that as we locked the side door and walked to the lot. The latch settled into place with a sound that reminded me of a gavel, not loud but final. At home, I set the messenger bag on the table and loosened my tie. I poured water and let the cool glass rest against my forehead. I looked at the old oak table, remembered spelling tests and birthday cakes and long afternoons with tools spread out on towels. Tonight, it held the folder that preserved the life Mary and I had built. I felt anger, but it was not the burning kind. It was a clean heat that tells a man he did his duty. The $600,000 house would remain where it belonged. The $200,000 would not vanish into a stranger's pockets. That mattered. The phone buzzed with one more voicemail from an unknown number. I let it sit. A text from Tom followed. Call in the morning. We will move deposits, document the day, and close any open doors. I typed one word, ready. I walked to the back door and watched the yard darken until the oaks became silhouettes and the first fireflies blinked into being. The house hummed its familiar song. I rested my palm on the wood of the doorframe and spoke softly, more breath than sound. Justice sometimes needs a crowd to hear it. Today, it had one. I climbed the stairs slow, the way a man does at the end of a long day when his legs are honest. In the bedroom, I set the watch on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed. Mary's photograph caught the last light. "We made it through," I whispered. It was not pretty, but it was right. I knew there would be meetings and paperwork and long conversations. I knew grief does not vanish because handcuffs click. Still, a deeper quiet was settling, the kind that comes when a house knows it will not be sold out from under the people who made it a home. I lay back and let the day become smaller. Tomorrow I will meet Tom. Tomorrow I will protect what we built. Tomorrow I will help my daughter rebuild her trust in her own good judgment. Tonight I would breathe and thank the walls for holding, They thought I was weak. They thought I was alone. They were wrong. What they saw today was restraint. What comes next is repair. Back in the small waiting room after the agents left, Emily sat with her two closest friends and stared at her hands. The bouquet lay on a chair like a tired bird. She asked me, almost without sound, whether I had known this for long. I told her I had moved from fear to proof, and that proof is the only language a room like this respects. She nodded in a slow rhythm, as if keeping time with a different life. Then she said something that pierced me. When that woman called you controlling, I believed her for a minute. I told her that lies often start where we are already sore. I did not defend you, she said. I told her she did not have to defend me. I told her she only had to defend the truth when it arrived. She let out a breath that was almost a sob and then almost a laugh. That is how relief looks when it is new. What few people saw today was the scaffolding beneath the moment. Tom's notice at the county, signed and posted. The fraud alerts at the bureaus. The passphrase waits at the bank like a guard who does not sleep. The vendor calls I made in a warm voice so the truth could stand alone without my money propping it up. The decision to mention Savannah was so that Michael would relax and believe I had stepped aside. The message to Patricia and her message to the bureau so that if truth needed a backbone, it would have one. None of it was complicated. All of it was deliberate. They thought I was weak. They thought I was alone. Now they know different. And tomorrow, when the paperwork begins, the knowing will have teeth. The feeling of being dismissed, accused of being controlling on your own child's wedding day, is tough, isn't it? If you believe that everyone deserves respect and the protection of both their assets and their dignity, comment on the keyword, justice. Now let's see what they will do to change that, right now. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The morning after the wedding disaster arrived quietly, the kind of quiet that presses against the walls of a house until you wonder if it will ever let go. I stood at the window with my coffee, the mug warm in my hand, watching the first light push through the branches of the old oak tree. The images of yesterday still flickered behind my eyes. Michael's face twisted in panic, Emily's bouquet dropping to the floor, the agents stepping in with calm authority. It had ended as I knew it must, but endings never feel neat when family is involved. They feel jagged, torn, like fabric ripped too quickly. Still, I told myself, the ripping was necessary. Lies cannot be stitched into love. Not for long. By mid-morning, the phone began to ring. Reporters wanted a comment, neighbors wanted to know if it was true, and old friends wanted to offer sympathy. I answered none of them. I called only one number. Tom, my lawyer. He picked up on the first ring as though he had been waiting with the phone in hand. "We'll move quickly," he said, his voice steady, professional. "The Bureau will handle the criminal side. You and I will shore up the civil side. We need to transfer assets, finalize the trust, and close any back doors." His words brought structure to the chaos. Within the hour, I was at his office, a folder of documents tucked under my arm like a shield. The office smelled of old wood and ink, a comfort in its own way. Tom spread papers across the desk. He pointed to the deed, to the retirement account, to the stock portfolio. One by one, he explained how we would lock them down. "We'll establish a trust in your name with Emily as a conditional beneficiary," he said. "Conditions are important here. She must prove independence, free of manipulation. Until then, funds remain untouchable." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and relief. Protecting assets from strangers is expected. Protecting them from your own child, that is a wound no father imagines when rocking a baby to sleep. That afternoon I signed forms with a steady hand. We shifted funds, created new titles, and built barriers against the greed that had already knocked once at the door. A portion of the stock was sold, liquidated to cash, ensuring I could live without fear of sudden loss. Numbers were entered, signatures witnessed, and seals stamped. When the last page was signed, Tom looked at me not as a client, but as a man. "You did right," he said quietly. "This is how a line is drawn." Leaving the office, I felt lighter. The storm had not passed entirely, but I had placed walls against its force. Driving home, I realized I was not headed back to stay. For weeks I had considered it, quietly at first, then with growing certainty. The house, worth $600,000, carried too many ghosts now. It was filled with both memories and the echo of betrayal. I did not want to keep walking halls where Michael's schemes had crept in, where Emily's doubt had hung like a shadow. A house can be shelter, but it can also become a cage. 2 weeks later, the sale was finalized. The house went to a young family with children who ran through the backyard chasing each other while their parents signed papers at the kitchen table. Watching them, I felt no bitterness. A house built on love should not die with betrayal. It should live again with laughter. I signed my name and slid the keys across the table. $600,000 transferred to my account, and with it, a chapter closed. My new home was modest, a $200,000 condominium overlooking a quiet park. The balcony caught the morning sun, and I found peace in watching joggers pass, parents push strollers, and couples sit with coffee on benches. My furniture fit neatly inside, pared down to what mattered. On one wall, I hung Mary's photograph, on another the family wedding picture, not as reminders of pain, but as testaments to what had once been true. Each morning, I walked the path that circled the park, greeting strangers who slowly became familiar faces. My breath came easier. My shoulders carried less weight. I was no longer guarding walls against betrayal. I was simply living. Meanwhile, Michael, or David Collins, as the courts insisted on calling him, faced his reckoning. The FBI's charges were sharp and numerous: fraud, false identity, and financial manipulation. His record of past cons surfaced like bones unearthed after rain. Friends who had once clapped his back now crossed the street to avoid him. Associates who had shared drinks with him now deleted his number. Emily cut all contact, ashamed of the part she had played, horrified by how close she had come to marrying a stranger. When the verdict was read months later, guilty on multiple counts, Michael's face crumpled and his shoulders sagged. Prison awaited. Freedom, wealth, reputation, all stripped bare. For Emily, the weeks after were heavy. She called, voice trembling, asking if she could come by. I agreed, though my heart carried caution. When she arrived, her eyes were red, her hands restless. She fell into tears before the words even came. "Dad, I'm sorry. I was blind. I let him use me. I let him use us. Can you ever forgive me?" Her words broke something inside me, but not in the way she thought. They broke the wall of silence I had built around my heart. I forgave her. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, and it is not the same as erasing consequence. I told her gently, "I forgive you, Emily, but you need to carry the weight of your choices. I cannot save you from every mistake. You must learn to save yourself." She nodded, tears streaming, the truth cutting sharper than anger ever could. That day we drew a boundary, clear, respectful, necessary. Love remained, but it was no longer blind. Days settled into a rhythm, morning walks, quiet afternoons reading, evenings watching the sun dip low over the park. I began attending community meetings, small groups that planned events for seniors, and fundraisers for local shelters. In that circle of faces, I found a new kind of family, one built not on blood, but on mutual respect. There is power in giving, especially after betrayal. It reminds you that the world is larger than the wound you carry. Michael's downfall deepened over time. From prison, he sent letters, pleas for sympathy, claims of misunderstanding, promises of change. I read the first, then left the rest unopened. Emily, too, received messages, which she eventually stopped acknowledging. His name faded from conversations, mentioned only in court updates or hushed side remarks. Isolation became his final punishment, a life built on lies collapsing into the silence of forgotten names. "And me?" I breathed again. I gardened on my small balcony, growing tomatoes in pots, basil in clay jars. I walked longer paths, sometimes 3 miles, until my legs ached pleasantly. I rediscovered old hobbies like woodworking in the community shop. Small projects, birdhouses, picture frames, became little victories. Each nail driven was proof of steady hands, of a life reclaimed. I found myself smiling at strangers, striking up conversations with fellow walkers, and joining neighbors for coffee. Life did not feel like survival anymore. It felt like living. The lessons of it all weighed heavily at first, then slowly turned lighter, like stones smoothed by water. For parents, I realized, love must be fierce, but also guarded. We cannot allow our devotion to blind us, to open doors for others to exploit. Protecting assets is not selfish. It is a form of love, ensuring that years of labor are not stolen by sweet words. For children, the lesson is sharper still. Gratitude is not optional. To dismiss the sacrifices of a parent, to treat their labor as entitlement, is to betray the very foundation of family. And for society, the truth is simple. Deception thrives in silence, but truth, though it may stumble, though it may take time, will always rise. On quiet evenings, I sat by the window of my condominium, watching lights flicker in the park below. The laughter of children carried upward, the bark of dogs, the hum of life. I thought of Mary often, wondered what she would say about it all. In my heart I heard her voice, gentle but firm. You did what needed to be done. You protected our legacy, even when it hurt. That thought brought peace. That thought let me close my eyes with gratitude rather than bitterness. Emily visited now and then. Our conversations were careful, measured. She spoke of therapy, of rebuilding herself, of learning to stand without leaning on others. I listened, encouraged, but did not rush to rescue. Boundaries are love too. When she hugged me goodbye, I held her close but let go quickly. Love that clings suffocates. Love that releases teaches. One evening, after a long walk, I sat on the park bench near the fountain. An older man beside me struck up a conversation about the weather, then about the community volunteer group. He invited me to join a Saturday event to serve meals at the shelter. I agreed. That night, lying in bed, I felt a quiet excitement I had not felt in years. Service, connection, purpose. New doors opening where old ones had closed. Betrayal had carved scars, yes, but it had also carved space for new growth. Looking back, I understood something I had resisted for months. Peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the presence of choice. I had chosen to protect myself, to protect Mary's legacy, to protect the truth even when it shattered illusions. That choice gave me freedom. I whispered one last thought before sleep. I don't need their apologies. I have my own life, and it is enough. Life after the storm was not loud. It was not filled with triumphal parades or grand celebrations. It was quiet. And in that quiet, I finally found the peace I had been chasing for months. My new condominium, worth $200,000, overlooked the park where mornings began with the laughter of children and evenings ended with the glow of street lamps. From my balcony, I could see the fountain in the center, water leaping in steady arcs, reminding me that life continues whether we notice or not. For the first time in years, I noticed. I noticed the rustle of leaves, the song of birds, and the hum of neighbors greeting each other with smiles. I had joined a local volunteer group, a small circle of retirees, veterans, and working folks who wanted to give back. On Saturdays, we repaired homes for elderly veterans whose roofs leaked or whose porches sagged. My hands, once clenched in anger, now held hammers and paintbrushes. Every nail I drove in, every plank I replaced, felt like mending more than wood. It felt like mending myself. In the evenings, I returned to my little balcony garden, tending to tomatoes and basil, the scent rising like a memory. Sometimes I picked up my old guitar, the one that had gathered dust for decades, and strummed until the notes carried through the quiet night. These small acts, humble and steady, reminded me that healing is not loud, it is consistent. The lessons from everything that happened echoed through me, but not with the sting they once carried. They echoed with clarity. One evening, as we sat in a circle after finishing repairs on a veteran's home, someone asked me why I gave so much of my time. I told them the truth. Assets can be stolen, houses can be sold, money can disappear. But dignity is something no one can take from you unless you hand it over. I almost handed mine away once. Never again. Heads nodded, eyes softened. It was not a grand speech, but it came from a place carved by fire. Meanwhile, the world outside my circle moved on. Michael, or David Collins as the records called him, remained in prison. Word filtered back through court updates and local news. He had lost everything: money, reputation, the friends who once flocked to him when he carried the illusion of power. Letters came occasionally addressed to me. At first I opened one. It was filled with apologies, with excuses, with half-hearted attempts to explain away choices he had made long before he met Emily. "I was desperate," he wrote. "I wanted stability. I wanted what you had." But desperation does not excuse betrayal. After that, I left the rest of his letters unopened. They sat in a drawer for a time, then found their way to the trash. My boundary was firm. That part of my life was over. Emily worked to rebuild her life. She rented a small apartment on the outskirts of town, took on extra shifts, and began attending therapy. She visited me sometimes, cautiously, as though each step toward me might shatter the fragile bridge we were trying to rebuild. She carried financial burdens now, debts left behind from the mess Michael had created. But she faced them with more honesty than I had seen in her before. Shame weighed on her, yes, but shame can teach if we let it. I watched her grow from the girl who once leaned too heavily on others to a woman learning slowly, painfully, to stand on her own. One morning, a small surprise arrived in the mail. It was a letter from an old friend of Mary's, someone I hadn't spoken to in decades. She wrote of memories she shared with Mary, of how proud Mary had always been of me, of us, of the family we built together. At the end, she invited me to join a larger charitable foundation Mary had once dreamed of supporting. I sat at the table with the letter in hand, and for the first time in years, I felt like Mary was speaking to me again. I smiled, folded the letter, and knew my next step. Life was not done with me. It was giving me a new chapter to write, one Mary herself would have blessed. Michael sent another letter from prison, a longer one, stamped with the gray insignia of the correctional facility. I held it in my hands for a long while before setting it aside unopened. I whispered to myself, "That door is closed. I don't need their words anymore. I don't need their apologies. I have my own life." And it was true. Forgiveness had already been given where it mattered, with Emily. As for Michael, some debts must be paid not with words but with time, with consequence. Walking through the park one evening, I thought about what parents owe to their children and what children owe to their parents. For parents, the lesson was sharp. Love must be given freely, but not blindly. Protecting yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. A parent's love should never be an open vault for manipulation. For children, the lesson was harder. Gratitude is the foundation of family. Without it, even the strongest bonds will crumble. No matter how much the world offers, nothing can replace the steady hands that raised you, the sacrifices unseen but deeply felt. And for society, the truth is universal. Greed and lies may glitter for a time, but truth is the only currency that holds value in the end. As I continued to walk, I found myself smiling at small things. The sound of a dog chasing a ball, the laughter of teenagers gathered at the fountain, the rustle of leaves under my shoes. I thought about how far I had come from those nights when betrayal pressed against my chest like a weight. I thought about the words I once whispered to Mary, telling her I would not let our legacy be destroyed. And I realized I had kept that promise. The seasons shifted gently. Summer's warmth faded into the crispness of autumn. Leaves blazed red and gold outside my window, and I welcomed the change. Life, I realized, is nothing but seasons. Some seasons hurt, some heal, some teach. The season of betrayal had ended. The season of peace had arrived. I sat at my desk one night, Mary's photograph beside me, and wrote a line in my journal. Character is the only asset no one can take. It was the truth, simple and final. Wealth comes and goes, houses rise and fall, but who we are, our dignity, our integrity, that remains unshakable unless we surrender it. I closed the journal, placed the pen down, and felt a deep calm. I knew there would be more days of loneliness, more moments when the ache of Mary's absence or the memory of Emily's betrayal would surface. But I also knew those moments no longer defined me. They were simply shadows passing across a sunlit wall. The light always returned. As I prepared for bed, I stood by the window one last time, looking out over the park. A couple walked hand in hand, children ran ahead of them, laughter trailing in the air. I whispered, "I finally found the place I belong, and every day is proof that I chose right." And with that, I turned off the light, knowing the story had reached its end. Not with bitterness, not with anger, but with peace. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.